Jeff, President Trump seems to be firing back in a number of ways this morning. What did he say?
Good morning, Pamela. The president certainly did. He was at his Mar-a-Lago resort, certainly feeling comfortable in his surroundings there. You saw him for a long time on the phone, making a phone call to members of the armed services from different branches who are serving indeed in different parts of the world. But then the president decided to use this moment here on Thanksgiving to get some political points in as well, coming in, essentially expounding on things he has been saying all week long, particularly about the border. Pamela, take a listen to what the president said about troops at the border and that controversial decision he's been blasting all week from the Ninth Circuit.
We're doing very well on the southern border. We're very tough. We get a lot of bad court decisions from the Ninth Circuit, which has become a big thorn in our side. We always lose, and then you lose again and again, and then you hopefully win at the Supreme Court, which we've done. But it's a terrible thing when judges take over your protective services, when they tell you how to protect your border. It's a disgrace.
So certainly unusual that the president is talking about this in that forum when he is indeed talking with members of the military, even putting several of them on the spot, talking directly, asking them about their views on the border, their views on other matters. So it's not necessarily what the president said that was unusual. We have heard him say most of these things. It is where he said it, speaking with members of the armed services as the commander. So the question here is, Pamela, I'm not sure the president shed that much more light on these things he's been venting at all week long, going, doubling down and defending his decision on Saudi Arabia earlier in the week as well. But again, defying, and some may even say throwing his own CIA and intelligence community under the bus, essentially saying that they have not made a ruling on that brutal murder of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi. So certainly, Pamela, so much to chew over there, what the president said. As we speak now, he is going over to see members of the Coast Guard here in South Florida for Thanksgiving as well. We'll see if he keeps talking today, Pamela. He seems to have a big appetite for that.
I was going to say, he seems to want to continue that conversation, reiterating some of these talking points we've been hearing. Remarkable that he does so in this forum on Thanksgiving Day. Jeff Zeleny, thank you so much. And joining me now, I want to bring in CNN national security analyst Sean Turner, a former director of communication for U.S. National Intelligence. All right, Sean, what is your reaction to this phone call that the president had with U.S. military, greeting them initially and then sort of turning it into a political event?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pam. First, I think it's important to point out that I give the president credit for making the phone call. It's the right thing to do. He needed to call troops. He needed to thank them on Thanksgiving Day. But like is so often the case, when the president goes off script, oftentimes he goes off script in ways that are particularly harmful, particularly unfortunate. And I think that's what happened in this case. Look, you have service members who are serving overseas on Thanksgiving Day. They are in harm's way. And the one thing that the president should not do is he should not seek to bring politics to them. That's not where they should be focused. That's not what their mind should be on. Pam, I served 21 years in the Marine Corps, and I can honestly say that having been on the receiving end of some of these calls, I never felt as though the president, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat, was bringing politics into the work that we were doing on behalf of the country.
Well, and just to sort of set the stage here, this was live. He's talking to members of the military in a teleconference. How do you think they felt as he was asking them questions and bringing politics into them? I mean, try to put yourself in their shoes as someone who served in the military.
Yeah, this had to be extremely difficult for those service members. Look, when you make a vow to serve your country in uniform, you agree to do that because you love your country. You agree to work for the commander-in-chief, to work for the people of this country. And you agree to do that without bringing politics into the work that you do. You do it because of love for country. And for the president to put military service members on the spot, to ask them very directly whether or not they agree with issues that are politically tinged in this country and issues that deal with kind of the back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, it's just wholly inappropriate. And for those service members who were on the receiving end of that, look, the president has to understand that while they will serve him because he's a commander in chief and they will serve their country, he has to understand that he's putting him in a very difficult position, and it's inappropriate for a commander-in-chief to do this kind of thing.
And I want to bring in my colleague, White House correspondent Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, what are you hearing about what was behind turning this scripted call into a political event and essentially an impromptu press conference?
Well, essentially, Pam, it's just President Trump being President Trump. He started off scripted. He made the typical remarks, thanking them for their service, saying he wished they could be with their families on this holiday. And then he went off script, as he often does. And it was during that part that it strayed from the typical military comments, the typical thanks and words of gratitude on a day like today. And it turned into him not only making political remarks about the border and about the wall, which he referred to as barbed wire plus, and comparing one service member's recent achievements to going to the Wharton School of Finance, which some members of the Trump family have done. But also he turned it into potentially breaching some sensitive information and making it more like a private call that the commander-in-chief would have with some troops, asking why certain ships were only in certain areas and how many troops were being commanded by certain people. But then the president started taking questions from reporters after he hung up the phone with those military members, and it really got interesting only more from there. Two big things I do want to point out, Pam, is one, the president said that he shut down parts of the border, the U.S.-Mexico border, 2 days ago. Now, he didn't offer any evidence. He didn't elaborate on what it was he was saying he shut down or which parts of the border. And of course, we cover this White House, and the White House has not made any announcements about this, and neither has the Department of Homeland Security. So we've asked about that. We'll let you know if we find out what the president was referring to when he said he has shut down parts of the border and could threaten to shut down the entire U.S.-Mexico border. And then the president also ignored his intelligence agencies once again, saying that the CIA has not concluded that the Crown Prince, the Saudi Crown Prince, ordered the killing of that journalist, when in fact we have reported that the CIA has assessed that MBS did order the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. Now, the president disagreed with that, but then he also said essentially that if the Crown Prince had ordered it, he wasn't going to disrupt a relationship with a U.S. ally, which he called a strategic partnership, just because of that, Pamela.
And let's actually go to that sound that you just pointed to, Caitlin, with the president basically going against the CIA assessment. Let's take a listen.
No, they didn't conclude. They did not come to a conclusion. They have feelings certain ways, but they didn't have the report. And you can ask Mike, they have not concluded. Nobody's concluded. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to conclude that the Crown Prince did it. The CIA doesn't say they did it. They do point out certain things, and in pointing out those things, you can conclude that maybe he did or maybe he didn't.
All right, so let's unpack that statement. I want to bring you in, Admiral Kirby, because as we all know, the CIA doesn't offer conclusions. The CIA offers assessments and assigns a confidence level. So do you think that the president is sort of using that as a way out of putting the blame on the Crown Prince here in the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
Yes, I do. He's absolutely looking for whatever wiggle room he can, and he knows darn well that the CIA is not going to come down conclusively and say 100% one thing or another, that they do provide, they have to provide all the context around what they know, and some of that context isn't as firm as other pieces of it, and he's using that as a fulcrum to avoid taking any measures strongly by the administration against Saudi Arabia. But Pamela, this isn't just about him trying to absolve the Crown Prince. This is about him trying to absolve himself of having to do anything more. He knows that Congress is going to act. This allows him to be able to look at the Crown Prince in the eye and say, hey, man, it wasn't me. I didn't want to enact these sanctions. I didn't want to put you under the Magnitsky Act. I got forced to do it by Congress. It allows him, in his mind, to keep his relationship strong with the kingdom.
And Sean, very quickly, I'm going to go back to you, Kirby. But Sean, I mean, as someone who worked in the intelligence community, do you see this as the president once again going at odds with the intelligence community? And do you see this as a slap in the face?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And John's absolutely right. Look, this is a high confidence assessment. And as you have with any assessment, you are going to have intelligence agencies who look at the intelligence through a different lens and may see something a little different. They may not be as high in their confidence as one agency, but in the end, you put together a product that gives the president decision advantage. It tells him what the IC assesses happened to the best of their ability. And for the president to once again, as he's done in the past with everything from the election assessment through other behaviors on the part of Russia, he once again suggests that he's going to look to others, in this case, foreign leaders, and he's going to take their word over his own intelligence community.